Britain is one of the most exciting places in the world to get into rock climbing.
There's a wide variety of rock types within a really small area, and each has its own unique character.
From the atmospheric sea cliffs of the southwest, such as this,
to the majestic mountain crags of the lakes, North Wales or Scotland.
to the windswept moorlands of the Peak District and Dartmoor.
Even if you've learnt the basic skills such as tying in and belaying at an indoor climbing wall, the idea of venturing out to a place like this for the first time can seem pretty intimidating.
So we're going to take you on a UK tour to teach you all the skills that you're going to need.
Before we hit the crags, we need to get familiar with the gear and learn how to use it.
Just going to have a quick look at some of the useful things that we brought with us to go climbing today. Obviously you need the basic essentials like a first aid kit, sun cream and insect repellent, food and maybe a head torch, a drink, jumper and a waterproof. And then onto the climbing equipment. A helmet is one of the really important bits of kit that you'll take with you. And we'll be wearing these anytime we're moving around near the base of the crag as well as when we're climbing. Got a chalk bag, got our rock boots, got our harness, and these are no different from the ones you might use indoors. A short length of rigging rope as well as a climbing rope. And then of course we've got the rack, which I'm going to hand over to Neil.
Right, so what have we got? So a full set of cams, some micro cams too, a set of wired nuts, some micro wires. We've got some hexes here on wire. You can always use hexes as substitute for cams, especially in larger cracks. Some quick draws, different lengths, screw gate carabiners, some long slings on slightly wider tape, and some narrow slings. Finally, a belay device. So that's the rack. The next thing is to learn how to use it.
A really good way to get familiar with selecting anchors and placing the gear is at the base of the crag, somewhere completely safe, before you go to the top and do it for real.
And another thing that you can do is actually clip in slings so that you can weight the gear in order to develop confidence. So let's have a look at the various different types of anchor and how they work.
A sling placed over a solid spike is one of the simplest and quickest anchors. Always consider the direction of pull, as they're prone to lifting off. In addition, if the top of the spike is rounded, be sure to seat it as low as possible. Check for sharp edges, and above all else, test it for soundness.
The next way to use a sling is to create a thread. You can use a nut key to snag the sling and pull it through, and then gather it to adjust the tension. Always use screw gate carabiners on anchors and try to keep the angle on the sling less than 90 degrees. And if in doubt, turn the carabiner around and use the wider end. Trees can also make very good anchors, but be careful to inspect them for soundness. This one looks really flimsy, so we'll definitely leave it.
Learning the mechanics of nut placements is one of the most important skills in trad climbing. Nuts only work in taper cracks because they rely on wedging forces to secure them into position. It's vital to get the size exactly right and to match the curves of the nut to fit the profile of the crack. Give it a really good tug to seat it into position, and you should then lift it upwards to check that it's not going to flick out. This becomes even more important when you're leading. This nut may seem right at first glance, but in fact it's only sitting on the bottom corners and is slightly too big. Note the difference with the size down as it beds into place. This nut is obviously way too small, but if you turn it sideways it can still be used. This method saves the day if a crack is too shallow for a nut to be used the normal way. Here we see it protruding. So take a smaller size, turn it sideways, and it's much more secure. Another time to use a sideways nut is if a crack flares outwards. Here, used the normal way, the nut rocks alarmingly on its edges and is prone to flicking out. However, when used sideways, the tapered sides of the nut can be matched to the crack to give a much better fit. Nuts can also work well in horizontal cracks, but check the direction of pull and be careful it doesn't flick out sideways. Nuts evidently don't work well in parallel-sided cracks. You should also avoid knobbly or irregular cracks, as the nut will make poor contact. You must also check that the crack doesn't widen out at the back. This placement looks secure, but slide the nut through, drag it down, and out it pops. On the other hand, nuts can be prone to jamming, and the best way to remove them is with a nut key by tapping them upwards vigorously.
Spring-loaded camming devices are the obvious choice for larger cracks, seeing as they cover a much wider range of sizes than nuts. The beauty of cams is that they can work very well in parallel cracks where a nut wouldn't seat, but the skill is in selecting the right size to ensure that the cams are working at the optimum angle. They must neither be too open nor too closed, and they will have the most holding power in the mid-range. Now this cam is way too large, so don't be tempted to cram it in, or you'll be all day trying to remove it like we were. Even if you do manage to work it in, with its cams fully folded, it simply won't have optimum holding power. This size may appear okay at first, but on closer inspection, the cams are way too far open. It is also important not to place a cam shallow like this, so that the outside cams come dangerously close to the side of the crack. Another consideration if a cam is slightly too small for a crack is that it will be very prone to walking in when flicked by the rope. This cam is working its way in ever deeper, and soon you're going to have major retrieval problems on your hands. But the worst case scenario with a cam that's slightly too small is that it may walk its way into a widening in the crack, and then it could pop out altogether. So let's have a look at the correct size again. Here we can see how the flicking rope doesn't cause the cam to walk in anything like as much, and clearly this is going to be a lot safer. Cams can work particularly well in horizontal breaks because they're not prone to flicking out in the same way as wires. It's best to place them with the wider spaced cams at the bottom, as they will be more stable. Here, 3 different sizes can be used to gain a placement in the same crack, showing just how versatile cams can be.
Micro cams can provide miracle placements in thin parallel cracks which won't take a wire. The other beauty is that they take a multi-directional loading and are unlikely to flick out. Cams can work in flared cracks, but it's important to be aware that they have limits. If one pair of cams is too far closed and the other too open, the placement will be marginal. But this placement is just about acceptable. Another consideration is how smooth the rock is. Even a well-placed cam can slide out if the rock has low friction.
Hexes provide a cheaper alternative to cams for larger cracks, and it's certainly easier to assess their security. They work the same way as nuts when placed in tapered cracks like this. But they can also be placed in parallel cracks by lining the sides up so they create a twisting force against the side of the crack when pulled. Before we look at knots, here's a quick reminder about harness safety. Tuck all your clothing into your harness and make sure the belt is as tight as you can get it around your waist. Always double back the waist belt through the buckle so only one side of the buckle is visible, like this. Not all harness buckling systems are the same, so if you're in any doubt about how yours works, check the instructions. They may not make the most scintillating television, but you're not going to get far in trad climbing unless you know your knots. The simplest knot you can tie is an overhand knot. The rope is literally just wrapped around itself and the end is passed up through the hole. This is a single overhand knot, which in itself we don't use very often in climbing. If we then tie the same knot in a fold or bight of rope, it creates a loop. It is worth knowing this knot, but again, it is less commonly used in climbing. The figure of 8 is the knot most climbers use to tie on. You start in the same way as the overhand knot, but then the rope is passed around itself one more time, and then you go down through the hole you've created. The great thing about this knot is that it's easily recognisable by its 8 shape. Tie a single figure of 8 roughly an arm span or about 120 centimetres from the end of the rope. Feed the end of the rope through the tying point on your harness. This is normally through the leg loops and the waist belt, paying attention to the small keeper tabs that hold the rope central. Check the harness instructions if you're not sure where the correct tying point is. Pull the knot close to your harness, then rethread the figure of 8 by retracing the knot to create double strands throughout. Tighten all the strands of the rope and check you've created a fist-sized loop. To finish the knot, tie a fisherman's stopper by wrapping the end around the main rope twice, coming back towards the knot and making a cross. Feed the end through both wraps and then tighten it. The stopper should sit up against the figure of 8 and the whole knot should look neat and not be dangling too low below your harness. A figure of 8 can also be tied in a fold or bight of rope to create a loop which can be attached to anchors, like this. The clove hitch is the knot you'll use most of the time to attach to anchors. Create 2 small loops, paying attention to which part of the rope is on top. Slide the second loop behind the first. Clip both loops into the screw gate carabiner and tighten by pulling either side of the clove hitch. Once you've learnt how to tie a knot, stick with the same method each time you use it so you don't get it wrong. This friction knot can be used in the place of a belay device to abseil and belay should you have dropped your belay device into the sea. Start in the same way as a clove hitch, but then fold the loops together like a book and clip both strands. The Italian hitch is reversible and works effectively in either direction. It's worth experimenting with this somewhere safe before you need to use it for real.
We've seen how to select and place anchors, now we're going to look at how to equalise them to make a belay. So we need screw gates on each of the wires, then clip one end of the sling into one of the screw gates, clip the other end of the sling into the second screw gate, always remembering to screw up the gate. Then run your hands down the sling in the direction of pull to find the point where they're equally loaded. To ensure the anchors are independent, tie an overhand knot to create a loop to clip with a screw gate. This way, if one anchor fails, the other isn't shock loaded. Another method is to clip one anchor, find the loading point and tie a single overhand knot here. Then clip the second anchor. You've now effectively created 2 slings, so clip a screw gate through both. A third method, which is particularly useful if you want to maximise the length of the sling, is to clip in with a clove hitch like this. And then, taking care to keep the join in the sling out of the way, add a clove hitch to the second anchor. Find the loading point and tie the crucial overhand knot. If you're in any doubt whatsoever about either of the 2 anchors in your belay, then don't hesitate to add more to the system. Here, an extra sling can be shortened with an overhand knot so that the load is equally shared.
And here we see that all 3 anchors are centrally equalised. So now that we've seen how to place anchors and build belays at ground level, let's have a look at how to rig a top rope. A common method is to use a length of static rope for rigging to extend the belay to the edge of the cliff. And in this case, the rope is being looped over a giant boulder that would be far too big for a sling. Measure the distance first and then tie a figure of 8 on the bight to create a large loop. Guide the rope into position so that both sides of the knot take the load equally. Look out for sharp edges that might damage the rope, and check that the rope isn't getting jammed too tightly behind the boulder. A cunningly placed nut will prevent this problem. The next step is to extend the rigging rope, but before you approach the cliff edge, always secure yourself. A good way is to larkspur a sling to your harness to make a cow's tail and clip this into a secure point with a screw gate. It's important to note that slings have virtually no stretch, so at all costs avoid falling off onto a cow's tail sling, as it would create a very high impact loading. Next up, tie a figure of 8 on the bight in the rigging rope so it hangs just over the edge of the cliff to allow the climbing rope to run freely. Even with a boulder this big, it is advisable to add an additional anchor. Take the spare end of the rigging rope back to your second anchor and use a clove hitch so you can adjust the tension. Always avoid sharp edges, and if the cliff top is a little rough, then use something to protect the rope, such as this rope protector. So with the anchors equalised, the top rope extended over the edge, and a rope protector to guard from abrasion, looks like our top rope rig's ready to go. So that's the theory. Now it's time to put it into practice at the crag.
Choose a venue that has short routes, solid rock and easy access to the top.
So we've picked Burbage North on Peak Gritstone because it means we don't have to drop top ropes down some of the classic routes on other crags that people are keen to lead.
Finding your way around the crag and using a guidebook takes a bit of practice. So before you get too close, find a place where you can stop and get a good view of the whole crag.
The next step is to work out where you are along the edge by trying to pick out some of the main buttresses. And to do this, you want to look for key features like cracks, flakes, possibly descent gullies. So in this case, there's this very obvious crack, which is evident on the topo, but we're actually heading for the buttress to the right.
Oh, that triangle block. So this is the rough area of the top of our climb. I'm going to dump the gear and just check with Neil that I'm in the right spot. Where is it? Finish here? Yeah, just about here? Yeah, okay. Just look in a V. If I stretch my arms out in a V, that's the rough angle and area that I'd like my anchors to be in, and that's where I'm going to look. So looking in this direction first, I can see I've got this nice boulder, and yes, look, it comes to a thread, so I'll be able to put a sling round there. So there's anchor number one. Coming across, nice crack behind this boulder here, but no, as soon as I stand on it, the whole boulder moves, so I'll ignore that. So over here we've got a thread between two blocks. It looks fine. I'll just give it a quick test with the nut key to make sure it's not just gravel in the gap. No. So we've chosen the anchors, now let's rig it. So there we go. Actually, now I have a look at it, that angle is pretty close on 90 degrees, which we want to try and avoid, or at least keep the angle less than that. So I am actually going to look for a third anchor somewhere in the middle. I've uncled the rope, found the middle. I'm going to clip it in and drop it over. Before I drop the rope down, I'm going to check that there's nobody down there, certainly no climbers, and if I'm not at all sure, then I'll just shout, "Rope below!" Neil, do you want to just give that a pull?
I think. Yeah.
That looks right, doesn't it?
Seems good.
Yeah.
Not twisted. It's running nice and smoothly.
Yeah, okay.
Seems fine.
I think we're good to go. It's tempting to find a nice comfy spot out from the base of the crag to sit and belay, but a place like this would be hopeless, because the first thing that will happen if Neil slips off is that I'll shoot forward towards the base of the crag. Far better is to find a nice flat spot that's close in and underneath the start of the climb. So Neil's going to tie into the end of the rope using a re-threaded figure of 8, and I'm going to belay Neil. I don't need to tie on. I'm going to thread the rope through my belay device like this, with the breaking side of the rope on the bottom as I clip it into the screw gate. If the breaking hand is on top, like this, it might be difficult to hold a fall, because as you can see, my body is getting in the way. Taking any slack, and that's us ready to go. So I'm going to keep the rope nice and tight as Neil starts climbing, because if he slips off at the start with all the rope stretch, he could easily hit the ground. Once he's up a bit higher, I can keep the rope slightly less tight. So I'm going to concentrate on a solid taking in technique. Lock off as I pull the slack through, swap hands but never letting go of the brake rope. But of course, all the time I'm ready in case Neil should slip and I need to hold a fall. Okay. Another thing to watch out for when you're belaying is just to make sure that the carabiner doesn't flip around like this so that it's cross-loaded. There we go, I'll straighten it up. So you're just about there?
Yeah, nice one.
So as Neil gets to the top, I'm going to take the rope in tight, get myself in a nice braced position, both hands on the braking rope, and then lower him back down, nice and slowly, and then control.
All right, thanks for that.
Hey, nice one. Okay, I had no problem lowering Neil off or holding that forward because I was able to brace against the rock. But if you're not sure about the weight differences, then find yourself a ground anchor, like this nice thread, and you can simply clip it into your harness, like that, and it'll stop you getting lifted off the ground. Abseiling is an essential skill that we'll return to on mountain crags and sea cliffs, but first we'll look at the basic skills here in a less intimidating environment. I've set this abseil up using a single rope, and I've tied a figure of 8 on a bight and clipped it to 3 anchors that I've equalised. I'm going to abseil on my regular belay device, which I'll thread as normal. And clip to the central loop of my harness, like that. As a safety backup, I'm going to use a self-locking prusik knot. The prusik loop is tied in 5mm cord that's approximately your forearm length. I'm going to attach the prusik loop to the leg loop of my harness with a screw gate. If I get the knot of the loop out of the way by the carabiner and then wrap the prusik loop neatly around the abseil rope about 4 times. And that's a French prusik that'll grab the rope and lock it off if I should let go. It's crucial that the prusik can't touch the belay device, or else it may not grip the rope when you need it. I've piled the rope neatly on the ledge and I've coiled some of the rope into my hand like that. I'm now going to throw it down the crag, making sure that there's nobody down below. If you're unsure about the rope reaching the ground, tie a knot in the end. I'm ready to go, but before I launch over the edge, I'm going to do some final checks. Check my harness is double back. Check the rope is through the belay device and clipped with a closed screw gate to my harness. Check that the French prusik looks okay, and check that the rope is attached to my anchors. I'm happy with all that, so I can set off. As I set off, I've got one hand above the belay device and one hand below on the rope, sliding the French prusik down. As I feed the rope through, I keep my feet wide, and as I approach the edge, I'm going to start leaning back over the drop. And this is the most gripping and trickiest moment. I'm going to let my body tip right back until my feet come flat against the rock, and then I'm going to start to move them. As soon as the rope touches the edge, the whole process becomes a lot easier. So as I'm going down, I can look over one shoulder to check where I'm heading, and I just go nice and smoothly and slowly without bouncing on the rope. So there's the prusik biting the rope and holding the rope locked off, so you can see how it works. I can have my hands free to do whatever I need to do. Even if you've climbed indoors before, there's a wide variety of movement skills on real rock to get to grips with.
It's always best to come somewhere where you can boulder or set up top rails rather than jumping in at the deep end on the lead.
So I'm going to show you some stuff here at the boulders of the Roaches in Staffordshire.
And I'm going to be shooting down to the sandstone cliffs of Kent to do some top roping. Now, when you're used to indoor climbing walls, looking up at something like this can seem pretty baffling. It's quite hard to see where the holds are, and really you need to use 2 skills. Firstly, you're trying to read the rock and try and guess where the best part of the hold's going to be. But if you can't actually do that visually, then you're just going to feel with your hand and probe and try and get the best place. It's usually a little bit easier when it comes to your feet because you can see those better, but the skill is to find the best handholds as quickly as possible before you get pumped. So taking a closer look at the sort of handholds you might find, it's amazing on a piece of rock like this that you can get so many different types of hold. You just got to look pretty carefully for them. Starting off here, we've got a 2-finger pocket that you can use. And then moving over, there's just a little sharp edge here that you can crimp, bending your fingers on top of it like that. Or you could even hang it with your fingers open-handed. And then on this break above here, there's a sloper here that you can use by getting your whole hand and your thumb in contact with the wall. And over here we've got a side pull, which only works if you lean your body over to the right. As soon as you come over here, it's not going to be any good to you. And of course the hold you always want but can never find, the thank God jug.
The most obvious footholds are edges. They work best if you turn your foot sideways and line the edge of the boot up against the hold. Pockets aren't so good with your foot sideways, so point your toe straight into the wall. Smearing is a crucial technique for outdoor climbing, used whenever there are no positive footholds. Keep your heels down to maximise rubber contact, make small steps and be confident.
But above all else, the key to mastering footwork is to avoid scuffing and scraping your feet on the wall and to avoid banging your feet against the wall so they make a noise. Instead, just to pause over the foothold, look for the best possible place and place your foot in slow motion really carefully and accurately, like that and like that.
A good basic body position is crucial for feeling secure on low-angled rock. You need to keep your body away from the rock to bring your hips in over your feet. This keeps you in balance and helps you see the footholds. Palming with your hands like this is a lifesaver when handholds are scarce. Overreaching ruins good body position and often leads to your feet popping. Stepping high is tempting when you spot a good foothold, but it usually makes standing up a nightmare. It also makes effective smearing impossible. Likewise, stepping out too wide also makes it very difficult to stand up in control.
The basic position for climbing vertical or gently overhanging routes is to try and keep your arms straight and keep your backside away from the wall, because if you get in too close, it becomes very difficult to see what you're doing with your feet. Bring your feet up like that and then work your hands up. And one of the great things about climbing on rock is the wide variety of fantastic features that you encounter, such as this corner here or the arete on the left. Now, it's rarely a case of just pulling yourself up on positive holds like you do at a climbing wall. You have to do quite sort of weird and funky things with your body in order to make progress. And with corners, the easiest technique is always bridging, because if you can get your feet nice and wide like this, especially if they're on good footholds, you can just take your hands off. And when you're getting into a bridging position, sometimes you have to use your palms, put both feet on the side wall, like that, and then step out. So again, using my palm to get my foot up. But now I find that the positive footholds run out, so I'm going to be forced to use a slightly more strenuous technique called lay backing. I'm going to turn
to the side. I'm just going to run my feet up like this, creating an opposing force. And with laybacking, it's a real mistake to keep your feet too low, or they'll slip, like that. And equally, you don't want them too high up, because it'll be impossibly strenuous. The best thing, just keep them at the mid-height, like that. There we go. Whew. Still quite strenuous. But the other thing you want to think about is the arête that we've got over on the left here. Now the thing with arête is that they always feel pretty exposed, and the technique for climbing them sometimes feels a little bit precarious. You can feel like your body's going to sway around the arête, so you have to make every effort to lean to the side. And when you're laybacking, you don't have an opposing face to push against, so you have to be very careful how you position your feet. And the same old rules of not stepping too high and not keeping your feet low so they slip apply. So just making nice little steps, keeping your centre of gravity in the right place, like that. You can also use your heel around the arête for a bit of balance sometimes, especially on a horizontal break like that. Heel can work really well. There we go. Nice one. Now, few climbers tend to be fond of chimneys, and they can be particularly awkward when they're narrow like this one. The important thing is not to disappear off into the back so you're never seen again. Shift your chalk bag round to the side or the front so it's out the way. Put your palms on one side and your knees, which are opposing your heels, and make little shuffling moves like that, pushing against one wall and the other. And then when it widens out, you can put your feet on one side and your back against the other, and it's actually not too awkward. Now, never make the mistake of thinking it's over until you're on the top of the crag, because one of the things that indoor climbing walls never prepare you for is mantle shelving onto rounded ledges like this. The temptation is to slap back desperately, but the holds just get worse. And worse still is that you can't see your feet and they're likely to slip. Better to keep your hands closer to the edge, decide which arm's going to turn over, and in this case it's going to be this arm. Look for the highest foothold, but if you can't see one, be prepared to smear, and then with a bounce, straighten your arms, get your foot as close in underneath you as you can so you can stand up without having to use your knee. Easy as that. Now, the only other technique we haven't shown you in this section of the film is jamming and crack climbing, but we'll look at that later when it comes to leading. And the thing to remember that above all else, what you're trying to do to master climbing technique is make it look as easy and as smooth and as graceful as possible, and avoid thrutching or being over tense. Just try and keep it nice and relaxed.
Now that we've seen how to place trad gear and looked at the basic movement skills for climbing on rock, it's time to move on to one of the biggest moments of any climbing career, your first lead. Most climbers regard leading as the real deal, but it's important to wait until you feel ready. Pick a climbing partner you trust, and above all else, the right route.
In fact, the route we're after is this one, leaning buttress crack, up behind us. It's given VDiff, and the guide describes it as well protected and pleasant.
It's important to be aware that not all routes which are given stars for quality are necessarily as well protected as you'd hope, such as this blank VDiff slab here.
So now it's time to rack up. Take a good look at the route first to make an assessment of the size of the cracks. But always take slightly more gear than you think you need for your first few leads. You can work on cutting your rack down as you gain more experience. Rack your cams on one side of your harness like this. We'll certainly be needing some of the larger cams looking at the size of those cracks. Wires can be carried on the other side of the harness, racked on large carabiners. For short routes, one set may suffice, but for longer routes you're likely to need two. The quick draws can be racked behind them on the rear gear loops. Slings can easily be carried bandolier style, especially the shorter ones. But larger ones are prone to tangling, so it's usually better to clip them together like this, so you can remove them simply by unclipping the carabiner. Your belay device is best stashed right around the back of your harness out of the way, because you won't need it until you get to the top. So that's the basic rack setup. You can personalise this, but the most important thing is to stick to your system and keep your gear orderly, so when you need something quickly, you know just where to find it. I'm tied in, I'm on belay, so I'm ready to go.
Now, rather than belaying on this first bit, I've actually paid out some slack so I can just spot Libby until she gets her first runner in. Okay, that. Right, look comfortable there.
Yeah, so I'm on a good ledge. This is an obvious place to try and get my first runner.
Now the reason I'm stood in close to the base of the cliff instead of somewhere out here is because if Libby does fall off, the hex is going to get flicked up and that's what's going to happen.
As well as Neil standing in close, I can also consider trying to use a cam instead, because that'll take a multi-directional load.
Now, Libby is already high enough above her last piece of protection, where if she fell, she might hit the ground. So she should look for another runner.
I've got a cam in that crack. It's a little bit deep, so I'm going to extend it with a quick draw.
Now when Libby goes to clip, it's important for me to pay the slack out really quickly so that the rope doesn't drag on her when she's clipping. And then once she's got the rope safely in, I can readjust the tension.
The ledges on this route make it easy to place protection, but you don't want to hit one if you fall off, so it's really important to place gear regularly.
I've placed a wire there, so I definitely need to use a quick draw to extend it. So I'm actually going to turn that top carabiner around so that the gate's away from the rock. And then as I clip the rope in to the lower carabiner, I'm going to make sure I clip it with my rope going from back to front through the carabiner like that, so that as I climb past it, the quick draw stays the way it should be lying. If I clip it the wrong way, in other words, from front to back, as I climb past, it's going to twist the carabiner and the quick draw round so that the gate knocks against that edge of rock, making it more possible that if I should fall off, the rope could snap out of the quick draw.
The next runner is buried deep in the back of the crack, so it needs to be extended with a sling to prevent rope drag. Extending runners is always a compromise between reducing the length of the fall and minimising rope drag, but in general, the more common mistake is to not extend them enough.
So I'm a little way above my last runner, and there's a slightly tricky move, so I'm going to try and get a runner in. And the best one is quite high, so it's going to be a full stretch, which is going to be hard to place, but once I've got it in, it'll protect me really well. So now that I'm a bit higher up, I can check that runner that I put in high above my head and make sure it is actually good. and it's seated. And because it's quite a long way since my last runner, I am going to back it up. The other thing I want to make sure I do is get really comfortable when I'm placing the runners. So I've got a really good crack in front of me, but the handholds aren't great, so I'm going to take my time to get my feet good so that I feel nice and in balance while I place a bit of gear here. There we go, that feels okay. Quick draw on. Bit of slack. Okay.
As Libby moves up, she must be really careful not to kick the runner out. And it's also important not to get your leg caught under the rope, as it would flip you upside down if you fell. Always step over it, like this.
So it feels like quite a high step, that, so I'm just checking I haven't missed anything more obvious. But I've got a good handhold. So I'm on what looks like very easy ground now, and it'd be tempting to just run up it without putting any gear in. But I'm not going to. There's an obvious crack. I'm going to put a runner in just in case I pull something off or fall off as I go over the top. And there we go. So now it's time to attach yourself at the top of the cliff. We've already seen how to find and equalise belays, so we can move more quickly here. The main consideration is the distance of the anchors from the cliff edge. If you can't find any good ones close to the top of the route, then move as far back as you need to. In this case, we have 2 anchors which we've clipped with screw gates. The next thing is to run the rope back towards the cliff edge like this. You should always make sure your partner is still belaying you at this point. Try to select a belay position where you can see your partner and minimise rope drag. Now secure the rope by clove hitching it into a screw gate which is attached to the rope loop. And then adjust the clove hitches to make sure the whole system is in tension and equalised. Now you're ready to belay.
Safe, Neil! Okay, I'll take you off.
Yeah, cheers.
Right, you're off belay.
Taking it. As the leader takes in all the spare rope, bear in mind that the rope may jam in a crack, so it's wise for you both to use the climbing calls to establish that all's well.
That's me!
The leader then clips the belay device into the rope loop so that the load is directed through to the belay rather than onto them. Ensure there are no twists and set it up so that the arm that's furthest away from the climber is doing the braking.
Climb when you're ready, Neil.
This allows the rope to be pulled back without restriction into the optimum brake position.
Climbing!
Okay.
Of course, the climbing calls aren't always essential at a crag like this, but they'll come into their own in more adventurous places. The belayer keeps the rope tight on the lower part of the route, where the effective rope stretch might mean that the second would hit the ground if they fell. This will also help them to feel more secure.
It's the second's task to remove all the protection, but the last thing you want are cams dangling down from quick draws like this. It's much better to clip them to your harness using the middle carabiner. It's so easy to forget the nut key, but you nearly always need it.
The belayer maintains constant attention, always anticipating that sudden slip. So here we can see Neil's weight going onto the belay anchors and not onto me, fortunately.
Okay, so we may be hamming it up a little here, but the need for good rope work really can't be stressed enough. You want your first lead to be memorable, and not because your gear fell out and you had an epic.
A single rope may be fine for the early stages of leading, especially on easier pitches that follow straight lines or cracks. But as you progress, you'll begin to experience limitations and feel the need for double ropes. The route we've chosen to illustrate this is Heather Wall, one of the classic VSs on Stanage. It wanders from left to right as you seek out protection. As we follow Neil's progress up the route, already we can see a sharp Z-bend in the rope has developed. This will clearly create rope drag, which worsens the higher you go, threatening to pull you off as you make the exit moves. In spite of Neil's attempts to pull the rope through, and my efforts to pay out slack, the drag is horrendous. It's obvious that a different system is required. In this case, longer quick draws will help a little, but won't eliminate rope drag altogether. The other problem, if you extend the runners, is that you'll fall further, and on short routes like this, it's a serious consideration. So in spite of putting another long quick draw on the last runner, as Neil pulls through, he still encounters a notable amount of drag. It's an improvement on the previous example, but nothing like as good as using double ropes. Uncoil them separately on the ground and tie in with one rope on each side of the belay loop, using rethreaded figure of eights like this. So I'm going to load the ropes into the belay device the same way that Neil's tied on. One rope into each side, making sure there's no twists. It's going to be okay, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right in. And we're good to go.
Okay.
So let's have a look at how we can pay out the ropes independently. The easiest way to do it is to split the ropes between your fingers. So I've got my index finger there between the ropes going to Neil, and I've actually got my fingers between the ropes down there as well. So the beauty of this system means I can keep the pink rope snug while giving Neil slack on the green to clip the next runner.
Got it.
I can take the slack back in once he's clipped, but still keep my hand round both ropes. So the most important skill for the climber when using double rope technique is to make sure you clip the correct rope into each runner. This looks easy from a distance, but you often lose track of what you're doing once on the route. If in doubt, shout down to your belayer for advice. So as Neil moves leftwards towards the yellow runner, it's obvious that it's going to be clipped into the green rope which is on his left. As he steps back right, both ropes are running correctly. You'll know if you've got it wrong, as the ropes will be crossed. On easy ground, it may be best to step back down to sort it, rather than risk rope drag, which has the added risk of lifting runners out. But here, he's clearly got it right. The ropes are running pretty smoothly, so when he tests it from the top, there's no drag. This technique is clearly the way forward for the majority of trad routes, which tend to follow wandering lines.
Routes with major sections of traversing require especially careful rope work. Here, Libby is placing a much needed early runner, but is aware that moving away from it horizontally will create a lot of drag. Clipped short like this, it protects her nicely as she reaches out precariously to place the next cam. Now she feels safer, she can step back and extend the first runner to lessen the drag. Today, the inside of the crack is wet, so she places another cam quite soon, extends it a little, and once again clips the green rope. She now makes the final awkward move without stopping. But once she's a little more comfortable at the far end of the traverse, she places a final cam with a longer quick draw to protect her and her second. The quick draws on these cams nicely reduce rope drag for Libby on the green rope, and by leaving the pink rope out of the traverse, it runs freely, and if she moves back left to belay, it will protect her second from above. Now, love 'em or hate 'em, but cracks are an essential skill to master if you're going to make headway with trad climbing. And we've chosen this one, Dexterity at Millstone, because it's going to require everything from fist jams to hand jams and finally finger jams. But before you set off, there's a few things to bear in mind, in particular your rack. Now, I've scaled my nuts right down because I'm only going to need one set. The crack's very parallel sided, so cams are going to be more preferable. Same with quick draws, not going to need many of those. Now I've got a full set of cams on this side of my harness to take me through from fist jam size to hand jam size to finger jam size, and I've doubled up on some of the key sizes on this side of my harness. Climbing on a single rope, the route's pretty direct, so double rope really isn't necessary. Got a nice stiff pair of shoes because when I'm foot jamming I don't want my feet to be crushed. Big chalk bag so you can chalk the backs of your hands. Now a good tip just before you set out is to work out what your first placement's going to be, and I reckon it's going to be one of these. So I'm actually going to stash that right there so I've got easy access to it for my first gear placement. Right then, let's have a look. Now it's always good if you get a nice flake like this to make use of it. Don't have to just use the crack. So good hand jamming sequence here, and let's see if we've guessed our first size correctly. Oh, that's perfect. Nice and high, so it's like a top rope. Right then, time for a bit of hand jamming. Now where most people go wrong is to be too weedy and tentative. A jam doesn't work unless you make it work, so stuff your hand in. Make a bridge by pushing your fingertips into one side of the crack and your knuckles into the other, and then tense your whole hand, keeping it as rigid as possible. You have two options, thumbs up or thumbs down, so if one won't work, then try the other. If the crack goes a little narrower, then your hand won't quite fit in, and off-size jams like this require extra tension from your hands to make them work. Always good to place your cams underneath your jams. Okay, so now the crack's getting a little wider, so it's time to switch to fist jamming. Here, the idea is to place your fist soft, wiggle it into position, and then tense it so it bites. If you get this right, it feels better than using a jug. And let's not forget your feet. When the crack is hand or fist size, you must turn your knees out and torque your feet in sideways like this. Right then. Now there's an obvious taper in the crack here. You're tempting to put a nut or a piece of gear in that, but that's the best jam because it's the most tapered part. So actually, I'm going to put a piece of gear either above that or below it. Below is good
it's not as in the way. That works pretty well, and then I'm through without the gear obstructing my move. Okay, so now the crack really is getting small, so let's do some finger jamming. Here we have two options again, thumbs up and thumbs down. It's important to try both and really torque your fingers into position. You can also try pressing your thumb against the side of the crack for more purchase. Make sure you really torque your foot into the crack by inserting the toe and twisting. If you don't do this, then this is what will happen. Now, I suppose tempting just to go for this finishing mantle shaft, but it looks like it might be tricky, so I'm going to stick a final piece in. That's what you want. Because that way, if you do fall off, you're going to be alright. You didn't know I was going to do that, did you? Brilliant. Let's have a look. Hand's not too bad. Passed the test, I reckon. Microwires are probably the least secure type of runner, and hence they're the hardest to have confidence in.
That goes in, but it's a bit big. So I'm going to try the size down. Number 2. Yeah, look, that goes much deeper in the crack. Loads of contact. I'm going to pull quite hard to seat it and tug it. Check it's not going to lift out. Yeah, happy with that.
It's normal to bunch microwires together so that you're not relying on just one, and so they can share the load evenly between them. Be especially careful not to kick them out as you climb past. Stop and get a better runner as soon as you spot one. When you're climbing on low friction rock like this slate, you'll need to rely on tiny edges rather than smearing. Neat and precise footwork is essential, and a pair of stiff boots will make all the difference. Flakes are fantastic features to climb, especially if you approach them with confidence, but there's definitely a knack to climbing them smoothly and getting the gear in without a tussle. Right Unconquerable at Stanage is the classic layback flake.
So, let's have a look. This flake is notoriously hollow. You can see the scar where there was once a little bit more to this flake. So it'd be tempting from a protection point of view to put a cam in here as close to the edge as you could, but to be honest, the sound of that flake, you want to keep away from that and keep your gear in the corner. So I'll try and get something right in here. Well, that feels a lot more solid, but I'm going to want to extend that so it doesn't catch on the flake. So I'll go for a long, quick draw. So the problem here is trying to see into the flake to get some gear in. The most comfortable position when you're laybacking is with nice straight arms, but peering into the crack is really strenuous. So have a look, try and suss out what bit of gear you need, and then put it in nice and quick. Gonna extend it again. Check the ropes are gonna run. And keep on moving up.
Feeling confident on steeper and more sustained routes isn't all about getting stronger. There are a number of tactics you can employ to avoid getting pumped too soon.
So we've chosen this route because it's a really good example of how you need to conserve energy on a sustained pitch.
Seems like it's got pretty good gear in, but it's going to be important not to place too much, otherwise you're going to get really pumped towards the top. Hopefully you'll be all right.
Oh, don't say that. I might have a real struggle now.
As you start the pitch, the runners need to be closely spaced to stop you from hitting the ground in the event of a fall.
Right, now I'm in a really comfortable position. I'm going to get a couple of bits of gear close together, which is going to enable me to go that much further. Probably one in each crack, I think. So I've got two really good runners. They're roughly the same height, so they're virtually equalised, which means I can afford to go an awful lot further on this next little stretch.
To move efficiently on steep, sustained routes like this, keep your hips over your feet and don't be tempted to overreach. Push up with your feet rather than pulling with your arms.
If I hadn't placed two runners, I'd be certainly thinking about getting another one in here. But because I'm so relaxed, I can afford to go a little bit further. Right, so I'll have a look here now, because I'm now quite a way above that gear. It's worth spending a little bit of time deciding on the best spot, because I've got a few choices here, so I don't waste energy fiddling around in a crack that isn't going to give me a good runner. Because I've run it out a bit, I could easily be feeling quite nervous, so I'm going to force myself to get really comfortable while I place this runner, so I'm not getting tired.
Runners placed high like this make you feel really well protected. It's like an instant top rope. But beware, it's always more strenuous doing things at full stretch, so keep this to a minimum.
I think. In fact, now I've got the first runner in, I'm really relaxed, so I'm going to put a second one and use that same principle again of bunching the runners.
So as Libby approaches the crux of this climb, she has several good runners in, but more importantly, she's got plenty of strength in reserve, so she can finish the job. looks like a good piece. Now, dealing with cruxes and overhangs, it's all about trying to conserve energy. Now, I've spotted what looks like a good gear placement up there in the roof, but it's evidently going to be pretty tiring placing it. Let's go and have a look. Trying to keep my arms straight. Good heel toe jam there. And yep, it's a big cam. That looks like the right size. And it's pretty strenuous doing this. And the mistake most people make is they get really pumped placing the gear and they try and carry on. But what you should try and do instead is you can have a little look around first, see where you need to go, maybe feel some of the key holds, and then come scurrying back down for a rest. Tactics.
Yeah,
And whilst I'm down on the belay, it's another good opportunity just to go through your rack, check that everything's in order, and also check that you're not carrying too much stuff, and if you are, you can always leave it behind on the belay. And you can even give the runner a little test, little tug, just to check it's seated and improve your confidence. And then after a really decent rest, time to set off. But this time, you have the benefit of knowing exactly where you're going, where all the holds are. You've placed your key gear, so you can climb super quickly, conserve loads of energy, get up to your high point, and instead of faffing around, you can just move straight through. Now, it might be tempting to stop and place more gear here, but I'm going to be disciplined and just go for the top. All sorted. What a cool route.
You can avoid them for a while, but sooner or later you'll end up on a route that doesn't have such good gear. The seriousness of this type of route can't be overstated, so try and stack the odds in your favour.
Now, I've come up to a decent vantage point to have a look at this one, and I've sussed that the cracks are pretty small. But that's enabled me to strip the rack right down and to take things like microwires, which I know are going to be pretty useful. I've also been able to ditch some of the larger cams and just take small and medium sizes. Now, it'd be very easy to get put off from below because there's no obvious decent cracks to head for. But what I have managed to do is identify a ledge which I can get first with my hands, and then I can get stood on it, and hopefully from there I'll be able to fiddle some microwires in. Let's have a look.
A slip from an unprotected start like this would be really nasty, so make sure your partner's doing their best to spot you. It also leaves you committed to carrying on. It'd be really tricky for Neil to get back down from here if he had second thoughts. Weigh up the risks carefully before you set off.
Right, well, that's my decent ledge, but I can't get any gear in these cracks, so I'm going to have to get stood on it and then see how the terrain looks.
Can you get more than one?
Yeah. Now that really is a very, very small nut. So I put a long quick draw on it to stop it flicking out. And the other thing is I've got to try and get another one in to back that up. There we go. Okay, so I've got two very small wires in here, but because they're at equal heights, there's a good chance that they'll hold my body weight, or at least they'll just give me enough confidence to see if I can move up and get something a little better in. I've got to be very, very careful not to kick that runner out as I move past it. And finally, I feel in a more stable position and I've got some good cracks in front of me so I can get my first decent runner. Brilliant, just what I want. Just having a look around, the gear really isn't very obvious on this route. A lot of the cracks are flared. Just goes to show that even on an E1 it can test your gear placing skills right to the limit. So what I've done is I've placed that nut sideways so that it fits better into a flared crack. So this is a section where route finding is absolutely critical. I know I've got to head right at some point, but I don't want to do that too late or too early. The rock above me all looks quite blank and quite similar, so I'm really going to have to pay attention to the line. Okay, so I've seen a line of weakness off to the right, but I'd definitely like to get a piece of gear in before I commit to it, just in case I've got it wrong. Right, well it's not the best piece, but I'm confident that I can't get anything better in, and sometimes on a route like this you just have to make do, and often it's the best thing just to keep climbing rather than tire yourself out fishing around for a better runner that doesn't exist. Just testing this spike because it looks a little hollow. I think it's good. Trying not to pull on it too much, keep the weight on my feet just in case. And at last, that's me looking at a good crack. About time too. Falling off should always be considered an absolute last resort, especially on the majority of easy routes when there's often ledges that you could make contact with. But sometimes you just might find yourself in that situation and it's worth knowing what to do. Now, we're not suggesting that you go out and try this, but here's what to look out for. The important thing is to be aware of your surroundings. Look and see if there is a ledge, and in the case of this route there's actually a spike, a metal spike sticking out, but I'm confident that I'm sufficiently far to the right of that so as to clear it. Also check that your feet aren't tangled in the rope or likely to kick your protection out. So the next thing is your body position in the air. Now you obviously don't want to get in close to the rock like this or you're just going to cheese grater down it. Equally, you don't want to fling yourself backwards or you're going to swing in hard. All you want to do is you commit to the move, have it in the back of your mind that if you pop, just cast yourself away from the wall so that you don't make contact with it and catch your feet and somersault, and everything should be okay. Let's have a go. Okay, that was fine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm in a good position to belay, and if it's a big fall, I'll be expecting to be lifted off the ground. But this can be a good thing because it makes the belay more dynamic and it makes the fall softer for both the runners and the climber.
Even on blue sky days like this, things don't always go according to plan. And you may find yourself staring at a poorly protected run-out section that you simply don't fancy.
Well, I've placed a cam there, but I'm not really very happy with it, largely because that flake you can hear is really hollow. A bit of it's already broken off. Really, my best runner is that last one on pink, and that's quite a way below. So that's all in my mind as I set off on this really quite bold section. Okay, here we go.
Listening to that sensible inner voice and being able to back off a route before it all goes horribly wrong is a vital trad climbing skill.
Well, this is where I've got to commit. The next section, all the way to the top, is really run out, so rather than get committed up above it and have a real epic getting back down, I'm going to try and back off from here. Bit worried about the gear, looking at taking quite a long fall. Because I've got a poor top runner, I'm going to down climb quite carefully rather than weight it until I'm at my next piece of gear, which is really good, and then I can get Neil to lower me off of that. So Neil, I'm going to down climb. The top runner on green's not brilliant, but the next one on pink is good. So just watch us here.
Always check the top runners really carefully before you retreat and back them up if you are at all unsure. If you still aren't happy, then try to down climb rather than lowering, and you can do this whilst protected from above. Here I pay out on green and take in on pink at the same time. This is tricky to do and requires you to split the ropes between your fingers.
Ooh, so now I'm back next to a really good runner on pink. I can relax a bit. Okay, Neil. Yeah, it takes on pink. Come back another day.
Only once Libby is down to the runner on the pink rope is it safe for me to lower her to the floor. And remember, you can retrieve all the gear afterwards simply by abbing in.
Setting off on your first multi-pitch climb is a massive adventure. Choose one that's a grade or two easier than you normally lead, has an obvious line, and good ledges to belay on. Bramble Buttress on Craigiersale at Tremadoc ticks those boxes. Plus, you'll often have the route to yourself. So we're at the foot of the route. Of course, it looks far less obvious now we're here than it did from down below.
I can't believe you've dragged this up to this. It just looks like such a bag.
Yeah, but don't forget, that is quite a common experience, that the first pitch of a long route can be quite vegetated and brambly, and higher up it'll improve, honest.
Yeah, let's hope so.
So we're all set to go. It's a multi-pitch climb, so we've got some extra gear, enough gear for the pitch we're leading, plus a belay at either end, some extra slings and carabiners. And because we're planning to walk off from the top, we've got our shoes clipped to the back of our harness.
Right, that's us.
Yeah.
That looks awful.
It's great.
You got your spade and wheelbarrow.
Hey, looks good up ahead. And I can get some gear in here. So already I'm coming out of the worst of the undergrowth, and the rock's a lot cleaner and a little bit worn, so you can tell that you're on track. You can see we've reverted to a single rope for this climb. Keep the rope work on your first few multi-pitch leads as simple as possible. Well, this is obviously the pinnacle, so this is where I'm going to belay. So I'll start looking for some anchors, thinking about where I'm going to position myself so that I can be in a good position to bring Neil up this pitch and to belay him on the next. So there's a good so I can get a good sling over the top of the pinnacle. And the first bit of gear that I place, I'll clip it just like a runner. Now, I can actually see all the way down the route from here, so I could belay standing here, but it's a really exposed and awkward position, and if Neil did fall off, not that he would do, but I could get pulled around the corner, so I'm going to look for something a bit more stable. I can see a nice thread down here, and this is ideal because multi-directional runners that that'll take an upward pull as well are fantastic. It's good. Safe. Hey, good pitch.
Nice pitch. You can see why it gets its name.
Doing a bit of gardening.
Right, where do you want me?
Why don't you go? Do you want to go behind me? That's probably the easiest, isn't it?
Okay, and flip the rope over.
Yeah.
I'll just show you.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, it goes. Good ledge.
Right.
Okay. So it's a good ledge here. So to make Neil safe while we sort the gear, I'm just going to tie an overhand knot in the rope behind the belay device like that, so it can't run through. And hand over the rack, yeah.
And I've still got a few pieces on the rack that I've taken out while I was seconding. It's important just to organise those rather than just leaving them jumbled on your rack. So do you know where this next pitch goes?
Check the guidebook, it's up that groove I think, but have a look.
Right, let's have a quick look. Bramble buttress, move left into a groove.
Yeah,
Right, that's obviously going to be
that's
that.
the groove, yeah.
Then go back right and up to the edge. Continue easily through more trees to the foot of the final tower. Thank you.
It does get better.
Okay.
Honestly.
Right, so are we set?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to turn the belay plate round because I've just in position. So I'm going to get Neil to clip in.
Okay, I'll just make myself safe then while she's doing that. Into the belay.
Okay, so just quickly take you off, turn that round.
So now the rope's running right, yeah?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okey-doke.
Happy with that.
Right.
Okay.
We're off.
Enjoy it.
A bit of smearing. See if I can get a runner on this spike.
Neil gets the crucial early runner as he leaves the stance. That'll protect the belay if he falls. Not too many brambles.
All right?
Hey, good one.
Yeah. Hey, well, Libby's very kindly agreed to let me lead the top pitch, so I've set the belay up slightly differently, just for ease of changeover. Rather than using the rope a lot, I've used converging slings, so we've got one central point, so we can quickly change round.
Sling belays make changeovers quick, but remember that slings themselves have no stretch, so always use at least a little rope when you clip in to make the system more dynamic.
Are you safe?
Yeah, I'm
Great,
safe.
I'll take you off.
Okay, so this time, because Neil's leading on, I'm going to run the rope through so he's back on the top of the pile.
Oh yeah, let's take the gate. Okay, so final check, just to check that we're all changed over properly. That's you in there.
Yeah.
Looks like we're ready to go.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Straying off route is everyone's worst nightmare on multi-pitch climbs, so keep an eye out for telltale signs of wear and tear, such as polished rock, trampled vegetation and worn gear placements. Here I'm also looking for the obvious line, as Bramble Buttress is the only route in this area. I place a final quick sling runner to protect the top out and to make it more obvious for the second which way to follow.
Right then. Now it'd be a real mistake for me to top out here because there's nothing to belay to apart from grass. So in fact much better just to pick a belay lower down over the edge here, and there's a nice spike just for the job. All I need to do is just back that up with one more anchor, and that's me sorted.
Right. Nice one. That's lovely,
Indeed.
isn't it? It's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it
that
was
top
good.
pitch, yeah.
Good recommendation in the end.
Thought you'd like it.
All
Right then, shall I just climb on through?
Yeah, go on.
Past? Yeah, I'm safe there.
Okay.
Yeah, take us off.
Right, you're off.
Okay.
We'll just run it through. Okay, that's me.
So for this final little bit, I don't need to get a belay, but I will just get a brace and safeguard Neil as he climbs over the edge.
All right.
Hey, here we go. Ticked it.
Yeah.
So I've left long tails on this rope so that I can tie it onto my back, make it easier for the walk off.
Now you don't want an epic getting off the crag, so check the guidebook and try to spot the line of the descent before you start the climb. At this crag, you pass a number of gullies that you definitely wouldn't want to go down before you reach the correct one. The climbing to be found on Britain's mountain crags is unrivaled and is an experience to be cherished. Heading off to attempt a longer route is always exciting. Today our objective is the enduring classic Cemetery Gates on Dinas Cromlech.
The line of the climb couldn't be more obvious, so on this occasion route finding won't be a problem. But it has a notoriously exposed hanging belay to deal with and a steep retrievable abseil to get back down, so this will be our focus. Right, so we've stopped to gear up down on the path because there's now quite a hard, tricky scramble, and the ledge below the climb is sloping and horrible. So rather than take everything up there and have an epic getting sorted, we're all ready to go now. Leave our rucksacks down here. It means you've got to have a think about what clothing you might want later on the climb. So I've put a little light windproof around my waist.
Okay.
As we solo up the polished approach scramble, we climb carefully and are aware of who's above us, listening out for any loose rocks or dropped gear that may be heading our way. Remember this step, Neil, really exposed, tricky step.
Yeah, worth taking care here.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't know it, you'd probably want to put the rope on, wouldn't you?
Yeah, for sure.
The first pitch of Cemetery Gate is steep and juggy, but incredibly intimidating. You need to place gear efficiently and keep moving steadily up to avoid getting pumped. Don't underestimate how the exposed setting adds to the feeling of difficulty. The famous girdle ledge provides a welcome rest, but setting up the belay is far from straightforward.
I'm going to look for a quick anchor. There's a good spike here. For starters, be nice and quick to get something. I'll just clip that as a runner. Because it's a really steep position, it's going to be a hanging belay. I want the anchors nice and high, so I'm looking up in these cracks here. I can see some really obvious slots. Oh, yeah. Yeah, brilliant. That one's good. This isn't so good, so I'm going to go for a third, which I can see where the crack narrows just above screw gate if I've got it. Other rope in. If I can be cunning here and tie a one-handed clove hitch. There we go. Now I can lean back and sort out the others. So I'm attached to one. I'm going to tie this second one off with a clove hitch back on me because the anchor was quite high. Okay, so I'm now attached to two good anchors, and then I may as well use this sling as well, shorten it off and just clip straight into that. So that's 3 anchors, all reasonably well equalised. So, happy with that. I can shout that I'm safe. Safe, Neil! Just think about the best position for me to belay. Sort the ropes out. Obviously it's a small ledge. I'm going to need to stow the ropes over the top of my anchor ropes and sling. So I'm going to lap it back and forth. I'm not going to make the coils too long because I'll drop them down the route because that'll just get in the way for Neil when he's climbing up. So I'll keep them nice and short this time. Climb when you're ready, Neil! So if it's a proper hanging stance like this, you need to get really good gear so you can be confident to really lean out against your anchors so that you can belay properly with 2 hands rather than half holding yourself in on the ledge. Also means if I lean out, I can see how Neil's getting on. How's it going? Good. It is a brilliant, brilliant route, isn't it? As Neil approaches the ledge, I think about where he's going to stand and make room for him to get up alongside me. Right. I'll clove hitch you into there, shall I?
Okay.
And then you can relax for a minute.
Yeah.
Neil's clipped himself into one of the anchors so that he can relax while we sort the gear out and change over the rack and so on. So obviously for Neil setting off then, this is a sort of precarious moment. So what a good idea is to clip the highest anchor as a runner while he makes the move round behind me. So yeah, put that on green, Neil.
Okay. A quick draw in the belay there. High runner on green.
With you for the top. Put that round behind me.
So I'm through a high runner in the belay. That means I can pass safely around the back of you, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll lean in.
Always feels
Cozy moment. Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Let's have a look. Yeah?
Check there's no
yeah.
twist.
That looks okay, doesn't it?
Brilliant. Yeah?
Yeah. Grand.
So is that me ready to set
Yeah,
off?
yeah, you go.
Okay.
Neil gets that important early runner in and enjoys the airy, well-protected arete that leads to the top. The top pitch of the gates has easier climbing but immense exposure. Neil moves well back to find a solid tree, but returns towards the cliff edge to belay, so he can see me. So I can dismantle the belay, sling off first, and it's always a bit tricky when you're on a hanging stance because you've got to reverse the process. And it helps if the belayer doesn't take in too tight as you wrestle with the clove hitches. Find a runner out, and they will often be quite well seated because you've been hanging on them. Climbing, Neil! Now Neil can see me, He sits down to be more comfortable and secure.
Hey, brilliant.
Great, that was fantastic.
Another blind day.
Yeah, that's good. Is it a while since you've done that?
Yeah, probably about 15 years. Makes me feel old.
Neil keeps me on belay as I head across to the abseil. So this is the ab point. I'm going to make myself safe with a sling cow's tail by locks, footing that into my harness. Have a look at what's there, what sort of state it's in. Go through the whole lot. Have a good check. It's really important, if you're going to abseil off a tree, that you abseil off a sling, a rope sling, or a tape sling. If you put the ropes directly around the tree and then pull them, then you'll damage the bark. You can see the bark's quite smooth there, and eventually it would kill the tree. So that looks quite good. I'm attached to that. So I'm safe, Neil. It's quite easy ground, but it's very serious ground, so I am going to belay Neil across. Is that you, Neil? Right, let's get out of here.
Yep.
So we're both attached now by slings to the anchor, which means that we can come off the ends of the ropes. And we're going to be setting up a retrievable abseil so that we can pull our ropes down after us. So to rig the abseil, let's have a look what's going on in amongst all this mess. There is a screw gate that's been left there, as well as those two old bits of chain. So that screw gate is going to be where we want to put the rope.
That's through all those bits of rope, isn't it?
Yeah, through the whole lot. Yeah, which means that those rope slings don't get worn every time you pull your ropes through. So I'm going to feed one rope through, join the two ropes with an overhand knot, about 60 centimetres or so down from the ends. So it's a simple overhand knot, but pulling the strands, the same strands and opposing strands really tight, and then just finally pulling the knot open to make sure that the knot's not going to slide down to the ends. There we go. So one rope running through the carabiner, and then the knot, and of course you've got to remember which rope you're going to pull, and in this case it's obviously going to be pull the pink rope, so that you're not going to pull the knot into the carabiner. It's a good idea to take the ends of the ropes down with you if there are other climbers on the crag, so you don't drop the rope down on their heads. So I've got the ends there into a carabiner and just clip that onto the side of my harness out the way. In this case, in fact, because it's also windy, I'm going to take some of the rope down with me so that it doesn't blow sideways across the crag. But first of all, I'm going to get myself ready to go. Find my abseil device. And get the prusik on. Trusty French prusik. Never without it. And then I'm going to coil the rope around my body to get rid of some of it, and I can drop this once I'm part way down the abseil and out of the wind a bit. Final checks, harness, that's all good, that's all good. So can you unclip that for us now?
Yeah, sure.
Take my sling off and I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go towards the edge before I drop any of the rope, making sure that there's no little stones or anything that the rope could pick up and knock over the edge. So I'm going to get right to the edge so I can see over, see if anybody's coming up. and I can drop the ropes. You can see they're blowing off to the side already. And off I go. See you down there.
Here you can see Libby dropping the coils as she descends.
To check the ropes are going to run freely and you'll be able to retrieve them, the first one down gives them a test pull.
Okay, now I'm not going to abseil with the French prusik because Libby's got hold of the other end of the rope to safeguard me in case I was to let go of the rope during my descent. But one thing I want to try and sort out here is I'm a bit concerned about this tree root. There's a chance that the knot could actually tangle in it. So what I'm going to do is just feed the rope through so I get the knot down past the tree root. Let's have a look at that. There we go.
So we're safely down, but it's a really serious place here, so I've attached myself to something while I'm pulling the ropes so I don't go over backwards. Make sure they're untwisted, separate them out, and then remember which rope you were going to pull.
On a busy day like this, you need to be considerate to other climbers.
Okay, watch your heads, another rope coming down. Okay, it's the knot.
Pulling your ropes down onto a precariously positioned leader will not make you popular.
Great. Yeah. Time for a cup of tea. Sea Cliffs offers some of the most exhilarating and memorable climbing experiences. Whether you're relaxing at a friendly venue or battling against wild seas on a big cliff, there's always an added level of commitment that's not to be underestimated. The limestone cliffs of the Dorset coast provide an extensive varied climbing arena. We'll be starting off at the subliminar area, which offers short routes with a spread of grades that start from a spacious platform above high tide level. So is that it up the middle of the wall?
Yeah, look, that's it. Finishing up that crack and then to that ledge.
To the left end of the ledge?
Yeah,
okay.
Oh, you can see it perfectly from here, can't you?
So where do you reckon we can ab in down to the platform?
Yeah, to the right of the route, straight down to that ledge, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah, should
Let's do it.
Set that up, yeah.
Yeah. Getting to the start of the climbs involves an abseil from stakes, which are commonly found on the cliff top. These may vary considerably in quality, so test them first before slinging them. If in any doubt, back them up with your own gear and equalise the system. In this case, there wasn't a stake, so we've used slings round boulders and a few nuts. A separate abseil rope is essential so you don't have to use your climbing ropes, and it may also provide a lifeline for escape. The tops of sea cliffs are nearly always loose. Avoid abseiling in above other parties and be careful not to knock anything down as you throw the ropes or go over the edge. Guide the rope carefully into position on the cliff edge and be sure to use a French prusik for the abseil.
Once down, move out of the line of fire of the ab rope and keep an eye on the sea. If the waves are high, stay connected to the ab rope and build a belay immediately. Even on a big ledge with calm sea, you should always start from a secure belay. Once you're all set up and the rope's uncoiled, remember to check that the ab rope hasn't tangled on the wave-cut platform. It's wise for the belay to be anchored at the base of the climb at all times, but some slack in the attachment means they can dodge falling blocks if needs be.
Okay.
Okay.
Once at the top, if there isn't a stake to belay, then you can use your own gear. Sea cliffs are often noisy and you may not be able to decipher each other's calls, so anticipate this and agree on a system of silent communication, such as using tugs on the rope.
Once you start abseiling into sea cliffs, it's really reassuring to know how to prusik back up your abseil rope, just in case you can't climb up. It's a simple skill, but takes a little bit of practice. You need to know some prusik knots. The first one is an ordinary prusik, which you tie by getting the knot of your prusik out to one side and then wrapping it through itself twice before pulling it. So that prusik bites really nicely on the abseil rope. So that's the one you want to attach directly to your harness, because that's the one you're going to be hanging on, that's going to safeguard you. You need a second prusik to act as a foot loop, and that one can just be the French prusik that we've already used to abseil in. Remembering to get the knot out the way at the top or the bottom. About 4 wraps, even up the ends. And then we need to attach a sling to that to use as a foot loop. Check that that's gripping as well. And then you can just clove hitch the sling around your foot. Okay, let's see how it works. So we need to get started, get some weight on your top prusik, and then it's a case of unloading your bottom prusik, lift your foot up, and then as you stand in the sling, grab the rope at the same time, pull yourself up and straighten your leg. To get the prusik, the top prusik, to move nicely, flick it open with your thumb before you try and slide it up. Slide it as high as you can, sit down in it and rest. Unweight your bottom prusik, slide it up as high as you can, and then both hands on the rope, stand up, straighten your leg, flick the prusik open, and you're off.
When prusiking, a worthwhile precaution is to have a screw gate carabiner ready on the belay loop of your harness, so if the prusik is slipping or you feel insecure, you can simply clove hitch in the abseil rope below the top prusik loop.
On more committing cliffs, there won't always be a good ledge to land on at the start of your climb, and in some cases you might need to abseil down the line to a hanging stance above the sea. A bit of planning will make life much easier. Recoil the rope singly as opposed to doubled over, so they will pay out easily from your lap. Always put a knot in the end of the ab rope. Stay tied in when you throw it down, and then once it's down, check that not too much rope is dangling in the sea where it could tangle.
The belayer should abseil first with enough gear to set up the belay at the bottom. If the cliff is overhanging, as is the case here, you must place runners to keep the ab rope near to the rock so you don't end up dangling helplessly in space. Thanks to the runners, Libby now only has a small swing in, and she's grateful for her French prusik, which enables her to take her hands off and start building the belay. When I descend, I remove the runners so that the abseil rope won't be in the way of the climb. And then Libby pulls me into the belay. You know who your friends are here, and let's hope she doesn't let go of the rope. Things can feel pretty cramped and precarious now, so this is when your planning with the ropes really pays off.
Take great care uncoiling the ropes so they don't drop in the sea. If they've been coiled correctly, they can just be laid out over the lap of the belayer. So Neil sets off and places an early runner above the stance. All that's left is for him to enjoy the route.
The top out may be easy, but it is potentially the most serious part of any sea cliff route, so always place a final precautionary runner. Drag is very common at this point, so extend the runners with a sling or switch the ropes around so you don't get pulled off the upper slope. So for our grand finale, we've come to the awe-inspiring Wen Zorn at Gogarth in North Wales.
And we're going to put to the test all the techniques we've introduced in the film on the mega classic, A Dream of White Horses.
Although it was first climbed in 1968, Dream is still considered a major undertaking. It traces a tenuous line across the slab before crossing the steep blocky back wall, a pitch which is renowned for being difficult to escape. The undertaking is committing and requires confidence from both leader and second. The top of the abseil is tricky to locate and requires some precarious scrambling, followed by an easy angled but somewhat loose abseil. This means that it is important to stop, gather the rope and throw it down ahead of you, showing just how useful it is to abseil with a French prusik. Today we're attempting the high tide version of Dream, which starts from a prominent V-notch on the right flank of the slab. This is obvious once you're level with it, and now I'm here I can start setting up a belay, while Libby follows down from above, taking great care not to dislodge anything that might hit me. And it's always a nice touch if the person who goes first has a sling connected to the belay, ready for the second person to clip into. For a route like this, you'll need a much bigger rack than you would take on a shorter single pitch outcrop. Take at least 2 sets of wires, a set and a half of cams, and at least 15 quick draws. You will also need plenty of slings.
The first pitch of Dream is unusual in that it starts with a down climb, so it's vital that the leader stops to place some gear for the second. This sets the precedent for the entire route. The climbing on Dream is technical and balancy, rather than strenuous, requiring a steady head and solid footwork. Here, Neil's got a decent runner on the green rope, but decides to stop and place a high runner on pink. This stops the ropes crossing over and means they'll be working independently, so if one runner fails, the other acts as a backup. With complex traverses like this, the second's job is to concentrate on paying out just enough slack so the leader can move freely, but so the ropes don't drop too low and snag.
Runners on traverses always need extending, particularly slings on spikes, which could easily lift off. At this point, I've just made what feels like the hardest move, and the climbing looks easier now, so it'd be tempting just to run it out to the belay, but I must remember to protect Libby, so I stop and hunt out a runner first. A Dream of White Horses is renowned for its scary hanging belays. Here, I've tensioned myself to a solid 3-point belay and spent some time finding the best footholds to make the whole experience more comfortable and secure. It's at this point, when Libby steps off the belay, that she appreciates the runners that I've left just below her. It's the belayer's job to make sure that the ropes aren't pulled too tight. It's different to belaying someone from above on a vertical pitch. A pull at the wrong time could cause the second to lose their balance. Here we can also see that the ropes are running nice and smoothly and independently from each other without crossing.
Neil makes room for me at the belay, and I clip him once again with the nifty one-handed clow pitch. We quickly re-rack for the next pitch and then check where the route goes next. The route finding on Dream is notoriously tricky. Studying the line beforehand from the promontory and then having the guidebook with you is essential.
In goes that crucial first runner that will prevent a fall directly onto the belay. Cams are particularly valuable on traverses as secure multi-directional runners. This is a truly magnificent pitch, and the exposure really starts to hit you as you launch up the never-ending flake. Here Libby is crossing that distinctive pink patch of rock that is a key navigational feature to help you keep en route. She places a final runner before moving down into the apparently rubble-filled concrete chimney. It's a pleasant surprise to find the quality of the rock much better than it looks, and she's soon attached to another multi-point semi-hanging belay. So with so many slings to collect on a pitch like this, it's worth the second carrying them bandolier style rather than leaving them to dangle and get tangled. Having to descend the final moves to the belay makes this a really serious section for the second. If they're unhappy, they can always leave the last runner in as a top rope and climb down to the stands. Once secure at the belay, they can then untie from that rope and pull it through. The leader can always nip back up for the runner afterwards.
The final pitch of Dream is undoubtedly the most impressive. It's also the most serious, largely because a fall by either leader or second could leave them stranded in space well below the line of the climb. Closely spaced runners minimise the potential fall, but it's also wise to have those prusik loops clipped to your harness just in case. The rock is more complex in structure on this pitch, and the runners less obvious. They need hunting out, and as ever, they need slings to prevent them being pinned to the rock. As Neil makes the crux move, a precarious step around an arete, he's well protected by the pink rope up and right. But he's aware that I won't be protected after I've removed it. So he steps up and gets a high runner to safeguard that move for me. Yet again, the route finding is far from obvious, and from the second's perspective, they can help keep you at the right height and on track to find the exit groove.
As I get towards the top of the route, I bear in mind that the rock is likely to get looser, so I test the holds and place a final runner to protect the top out. And would you believe it, I've even saved enough slings to make a decent belay. And with the sun now out for Libby to follow the final pitch, it looks like the job's nearly done. So one last useful tip if you're seconding a traverse and you feel insecure on an awkward move, is leave the runner in until you climb past it to a more secure position, like Libby's doing here. Then you can reach back and remove the runner afterwards. It's worth noting that on a traverse, the tension from the ropes makes it hard to remove runners while they're still clipped to it, so unclip them first and just be extra careful not to drop them as you take them out. So as Libby makes the finishing moves to a dream of white horses, that brings us to the end of our trad climbing journey. We hope you've enjoyed following us from the early steps of the first lead right through to this magnificent climb. But really, this is just the start. There are so many more challenges out there, and we wish you the best of luck searching them out.